Right, so I'm going to go back through what I went through in the lecture, which is setting up a build environment and looking a little bit at assembly programming. So as I said before, I'm going to be using this thing called Vagrant, which is simply a way of creating virtual machines. So Vagrant itself, you can get it for various platforms. It's written in Ruby, and it's just a way of starting up virtual machines. It doesn't care what virtual machines. So you can get it for OS X, Windows, all of these platforms. So I'm going to use a version of Debian, and well, I'll make myself a directory. Oh, no, call myself something else. I'm going to create a Vagrant thing. The box that I'm going to use, which is a virtual machine, is going to be a Debian installation because I just happen to prefer that to Ubuntu and it's smaller. And the specific version that I'm going to be using is Jessie 64. So Jessie is one of the fairly recent Debian releases, and the 64 just means 64-bit. So I set up Vagrant, and it tells me I've got a Vagrant file. I can look at this, and this actually contains various information about the configuration. So it contains things like the name of the box. I could use other boxes, and there's different things I can set up. Like I can actually change the properties that are being used with VirtualBox. I can change all kinds of things. So I can then bring up this virtual machine. So I've already brought up a Jessie 64 box before. So on my computer there's already a cached version of the zipped box, which is kind of like a compressed ISO, I guess you could view it. Various things happen. So it does fiddling with network ports, so it sets up port 22 and maps it to 222. 22, you may know, is the SSH port, and that's how I'm actually going to get to the thing. And behind the scenes, the machine is booting, so Vagrant's waiting for the whole thing to happen. Last thing it does is install this thing called rsync, which it uses to actually copy things backwards and forwards, but we won't worry too much about that right now. Okay, so to get into my virtual machine, which is running under VirtualBox, I can SSH in, and now I'm in my virtual machine. So things that I want to do with this well, the things I want to do with this are install my MIPSToolChain. So the tool that I use to install things is apt, and some things I have are apt cache, which lets me look at the things that are installed, and apt get, which allows me to download things. So if I use apt cache, one of the things I can do is search for packages that could be installed. So if I, for example, search for GCC, I find all the things that talk about GCC. And I can refine that search a bit by essentially doing a conjunction and saying something like, I could search for GNU, oh, it's a bad choice. I can search for x86, and it tells me the various versions of this for x86. Some of which are Windows, some of which are actually Linux compiler GCC 4.8 x86, which is actually this machine, that's the triple. I don't want x86 though, I actually want MIPS. So there's nothing relating to MIPS in this GCC thing. So I'm actually going to have to hack this installation slightly to actually get the sources. And this is why I want to do it in a virtual machine, because I don't want to do this on my main machine because there's always a chance that I'll mess things up. So the thing that controls where apt looks for packages is in this file called etc apt sources, and at the moment it's only configured to take Jessie updates. So Jessie is stable, so it pretty much guarantees that every single package will work with every other package. I'm going to break that because I actually want to install things from unstable. So unstable doesn't mean anything as bad as it sounds, it just means it includes things that haven't been completely rigorously tested. And according to Debian's ideas of rigorous testing, that's actually quite a lot of testing. So what I want to do is try take this, and I'm actually going to at the bottom say, as well as Jesse, I want to include unstable. This is not a particularly recommended way of doing your desktop, but for a virtual machine this is kind of okay. So I'm going to try and write this thing, and I'm actually getting a permission denied, and that's because etc apt sources is a file that's owned by root, and so I'm not allowed to actually do anything with that. So to actually modify it, I'm going to use the sudo command, which will do the command nano or text editor as su or as root or as superuser. So I'll do the same thing again, copy it down, add unstable. Oops. I'll write it out again, and this time I can write it because I had permissions. So I've added a new source to my apps list. So now I should actually update these things. For this I actually use upget, apt-get, and I do update. And it will go along and it will look at all of the sources it's got available, download them to find out what packages are now available. So unstable actually has more stuff in it than Jesse, so it has to do more. Okay, so now I can do the same thing again, and don't need sudo. Search for MIPS, and now a whole bunch of stuff comes back, and we can see that there's actually G++ and GCC and all kinds of things in there now. So if I filter that down a bit to GCC, even filtered down by that, we've actually got a few different kinds of GCC thing going on. There's some sort of things you might not know about, like GCC Go is a compiler for the Go language. There's various libraries that are used in GCC. But the thing that we want is GCC, MIPS, Linux, GNU. So GCC is the program, and then this part is what's called the toolchain triple. So one part is the instruction set architecture. So in this case MIPS, and that can be big endian or little endian. Linux, which is to do with the actual operating system interface. In this case it's Linux, but there could be other things like Cygwin, MinGW, all of these things. Then GNU, which is to do with the calling convention. So this is to do with how do you actually pass things to a function, what register do you use, how do you manage the stack, how do you return things from a function. But we want this one. So if I now, using sudo, ask to install this, then it'll say, are you sure you want to install this? Yes. Download it all. Once it's got it, it packs it. Notice it's got a whole bunch of other stuff coming in. So binutils is coming in, atomic libraries, all kinds of interesting things. MPFR is actually a arbitrary precision floating point library. Yeah, there's lots of stuff. Oh, actually it's GCC 5, that's quite good. So it's quite an up-to-date GCC. So now I have MIPS, Linux, GNU, and there's actually a whole bunch of different things that I can run here. So there's things like AS, which is an assembler, a preprocessor, GCC itself. Also some other things that are quite useful, so things like objdump, which is a way of looking inside an executable, which can be quite useful, and things like LD, which is the linker. However, GCC can actually do a lot of things that both the linker and the assembler can do. So most of the time we can actually get away with just using GCC because it's kind of a Swiss Army knife.